Hello, this is hopefully a reasonably quick introduction to A Bad Year in Blight Town, which is the simulation that we use in the CQU unit, Justice, Strategy and Alliances, in order to help you understand strategic thinking and strategic outcomes. So, how do we go about playing this game / simulation? Well, it takes place over 10 weeks of the course, each of which represent roughly a month or so in the time in the town. And the town is one that's fallen on rather bad economic times, facing a lot of social problems, including crime. And your goal is to improve the 4 statistics that define the town, which are prosperity, accord, well-being, and safety. I'll talk about what those are later. To improve those to get better outcomes for the town. In play, you represent one of 4 different organisations, and each of those organisations is tied to one of those statistics. So your organisation produces resources that you can spend on improving that statistic, and you also gain points in regards to how you improve those stats. So your main goal for each team is to improve one of those stats. Sometimes you'll be doing that at the expense of other stats and in competition with other teams, but hopefully much of the time you'll be able to collaborate to produce outcomes that are good for everyone. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of how all this works, I think it's best to start with the 4 phases that happen each week to give you an idea of what you do and hopefully to reassure you that the decisions you make are going to be reasonably easy to make, particularly at the start. And I would encourage you, if you have any doubts, particularly at the start, just to jump in and have a go. You can't break it. You're not going to sabotage yourself at this early stage, and you'll be able to get a sense of how it all works. So what are the 4 phases? Well, first of all, there's the news phase. And this is basically the moderation phase. This is all human moderated by me. I'd like to have this develop with more automation involved, but at the moment, the decisions you make each week need to be moderated by me. I need to roll out the effects that they have across the different groups, across the orgs and across the town. So the first phase is that news phase where I announce what's happened in the previous week. Now, I do encourage people to narrate the outcomes. What I mean is your outcomes will often be seen as just a set of numbers, plus to this, plus to that, but within your teams and with the other teams to be able to describe what happened in a more storytelling mode. So you're able to say, oh, look, people are feeling safer in the streets, security has gone up, this is what's happened. So there's not a formal stage at which you actually narrate what happens, but I'm just encouraging at this stage not to think in this game in terms of the numbers, but in terms of what the numbers represent. The next 2 phases are the phases that you make the most decisions. There's the organisation phase, or also known as the town hall phase, which is followed by the problem-solving phase. Now, each of your organisations has to do 2 things. One is to build your internal capacity to be a problem solver, to develop your organisation. That takes place in the organisation phase, where you put bids on different resources and you send your people out to work in different aspects of the city. And the phase that follows it, the problem-solving phase, is where you seek to address the city's problems, which are different hotspots that occur each week. I'll explain what those are in a moment, where you use the resources that your organisation generates each week in order to solve those problems and make the city a better place. The 4th phase is the comms phase, which is where we communicate back and forth over what your decisions are for that week and how they impact on each other, and then it goes back to me to moderate those impacts in order to feed into the next news phase. Now, if we're doing this all in the same session, this is reasonably easy. Because we're doing this partially on Teams, it's going to mean the process gets a bit drawn out, but we will adjust the way in which we do it over time. At the moment, I don't feel the need to set deadlines, but there might be a point further in the term where I have to say you need to make your organisation decisions by Tuesday or something like that, so that I'm able to moderate and give you feedback on what's happened with your decisions. Now I'm going to have a look at some of the resources that we use to play the game, and some of the points of information that we use. I'm going to draw on the previous version of the game that ran, which is the final state. It's at the end of the game, so there's a lot more complexity than what we'll start with, but it'll give you an idea of what these different resources are. So the first thing I want to start with is the town guide. Now the town guide will tell you at the top, these are all Google Docs, so they're all shareable, they're all ones that you can write on. At the top it'll tell you what the month is. This is obviously at the end. What the stats are at the moment of the town, and this is obviously again at the end of a game, and we can see that one group has roared ahead to win the game. There's the map. This is the previous map of the town, which is generated by the group at the start, as is what are the key locations within that town. And the other thing we get in the town page is a list of the current hotspots that are available and the ones that have been resolved. So at this point they've all been resolved, so let's drop down to some of the first earlier some of the earliest hotspots to give you an idea of what happens. So each week you'll be provided with a set of hotspots, which is this material here, and they are the particular problems that you want to solve in the problem solving phase. You'll have a choice of them, and each of them will require different resources in order to solve them. So let's just quickly run through the different parts of these challenges, and you'll be able to have a look at your own town page to see what the starting hotspots are. The second set of information here, where we say resolution, that's all secret information at the moment. You won't find out till you've actually resolved. So all you'll get is this stuff here. So what's involved? No, there's a number at the top that just helps me identify which is the number of the hotspot. You don't have to worry about that. There is a description at the top here of what it's called. A little rundown on what the fact scenario is, and there's always a link to a website, a news site, or some other source of information that the hotspot is based on to show you how it's where it's come from. However, the bits that are relevant to the game, first of all, here is the assets. That's what it requires to actually solve it. So you actually require 5 points of intelligence, of the intelligence resource, to solve this, which means it's probably going to be one that's going to be solved by the enforcement group, who are linked to intelligence, but not necessarily. And as time goes on and you get more complicated scenarios, you're going to get more of a mixture of different assets that are required. There's also the coordinates that tell you where on the map it occurs, and for some of the organisations that's important. The actual location becomes very important to them, but not all of them. There's also you see there are 3 zeros here. That's how long the hotspot has been in play. Each week there's an addition. There's one of these is crossed out, and then if it's not resolved, it hits flashpoint, and there's a negative consequence for everyone. So let's move down to the bottom part. This is the secret information that you only find out once it's been resolved. If you solve it in the first week, so there's no it hasn't been allowed to stick around, your rewards are 10 intelligence, +1 to the safety of the town, and 1 victory point. But as you see, these diminish each week that it's left to sit, and it's left to escalate. And if it escalates for 3 weeks, it basically blows up in a flashpoint, and it has a negative impact. and that's negative impact in this case is an impact on the safety of the town. So as you can see, this version has heaps and heaps of different hotspots. But when you look at your own starting town guide, there'll only be 4, and they'll have reasonably easy objectives to reach. All right, so that is the town guide. Now the second thing I want to look at is the town hall. This is relevant to the organisation phase, and this is the second phase of the game when you're building your organisation. And we'll have a look at a bit of how all that works. The first most important thing you do in the organisation phase is you bid on the amount of budget that you want for that term. For that turn, and your bid is between +3 and -3, and that's what your budget is. Now, when you begin, or any time during the game for that matter, you can't bid minuses if you don't have anything in the bank. But you can bank things and bid lower and actually draw on your reserves. Why would you do that? Because the person who has the lowest bid in the budget phase gets to act first in all the phases. So if you want priority, you want to bid reasonably low, but you don't know what the other teams are going to bid. So you need to sort of kind of guess what that's going to be. So the first thing we do each week after the news phase is I ask everyone for their budget bids. So between +3 and -3, because you don't have any resources to start with, or any budget to start with, you'll be between +3 and 0. Once I've found out what everyone's bid, I then announce in here what your order is, and then we go through your choices of what you're going to do with your workers for each turn. Now everyone starts with 2 workers, and those workers can be allocated to different functions on this page. You'll get more workers as time goes on, but to start with you just have to pick 2. So in each of these areas there is slots. So the function center has 2 slots, records office has 2 slots, so on and so forth. So each of these slots will improve the internal ratings of your organization and your organization's ability to purchase upgrades. To start with, you're going to really want to focus on these locations. Your city improvement locations, you can't actually access because you need 3 workers, but when you allocate 3 workers, they'll improve. When 3 workers are allocated to these, they will improve overall town stats. Now you can collaborate with other people, so you might each use 1 worker from 3 groups, or one might use 2, one might use 1. But honestly, you don't want to be doing this at the start of the game. It's only later on when you have workers to spare that you want to think about improving this town stats directly. There are also a set of open locations where any number of workers can be placed, and those can do different things in the game. So you can trade in some of your victory points for some external assets, and I'll talk to you about the difference between external and internal assets in a moment. You can change the market below, you can take an escalation off of a hotspot, and you can exchange one internal asset for another. So we'll talk about those later on. Again, you're not going to be wanting to do those at the start, but I'm just letting you know that there's this other thing here, and unlike the others where a worker will take a slot, if you pick this one, no one else can pick it. Someone else can pick the second one. If someone picks the second one, then no one can go to the records office. Unlike those, these open locations can have any number of people attached to them. So what do you do with all these stats, this prestige, know-how, efficiency, morale, and indeed your budget? You purchase upgrades to improve your organization. And there is an upgrades market at the bottom of the page, and that has a list of 5 upgrades that you could buy each week. A cost, so your coffee machine is going to cost you 1 point of efficiency, but it'll also give you an extra point of efficiency every round. Now these do cycle, so at the start of the next round, the top one will disappear and there'll be a new upgrade placed at the bottom, and extra upgrades if some of these have been purchased. So these are the core ways in which you improve your organization from within. And as the game goes on, you get more and more, you get better and better, but more and more costly upgrades that allow you to affect the town stats more directly and affect your winning conditions more directly. So it's worth thinking about at the beginning. Do you want to buy some of these? Do you want to save your internal resources and wait till something better comes along? That's all strategic decisions for you to take. But that's what happens in your first set of decisions that you need to make each week. Will first of all be, what budget are you going to ask for between 1 and 3, and then in order of your action order, which is the least budget first, you get to place your workers in these slots. And the way you do that is this is write enabled. You can just type each week. You can just get in there. When it's your turn, you can get in and type your organizational name next to the ones that you've picked. So we're really going to focus on those first set of locations at the start of the game. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about is the playbooks. These are separate for each of your organizations. Each of you has a different playbook that describes what your objectives are and what individual abilities and separate mini games that your organization has. As usual, we'll be starting reasonably simple. I've actually brought in the end of game version of the admin playbook previously to show you some of the things that are there. So this is more complicated than yours is going to be to start with. All right. First of all, there's your name, and you can. This group hasn't given themselves a fancy name. You can give yourself a fancy name if you like. There's also the link here if you need it for this particular document, if you need to get back into it for whatever reason. You see, each group gets to pick a color. That might be relevant for things that you put on the map or whatever, or just for simplicity, but it's best to pick a color. And what you've also selected your office location at the start of the game. That can be relevant for some victory conditions. There is also a list of your current victory points. This group has done pretty well. They're up to 104. And also the number of workers. So by the end of the game, you'll end up with 5 workers if everything goes well. Your organization is defined by 2 sets of assets, external assets and internal assets. Right? External assets are the things that you can use to solve hotspots and also crises, and I'll talk about crises at the end of this video. So as you can see, this group's doing pretty well. They've got a lot of influence, a lot of resources, not so much in the goodwill though. The other thing that's in this is not going to be in your group at the start with what will be in your playbook is every group has a different speciality. And they gain a certain form of external resource. So this is an admin group, and they gain resources. That's their speciality. There's also, under here, a list of the upgrades that they've bought in the town hall phase, and they're all things that have given them additional resources. So, as you can see, you start off with just a +2 each round, but you get all these other things as you buy things at the in the town hall phase. So these ones are relevant for solving problems, for your hotspots and your crises. In terms of your internal assets, you can see these aren't quite as big because this group has been spending and buying themselves additional resources, additional upgrades so that they can solve problems. We've got budget, which is what you put your bid in for each round, and these other issues: know-how, efficiency, morale, and prestige. And down here are the upgrades that have been purchased that help produce more of those internal assets. So to begin with, the upgrades you can buy are things that help you produce more internal stuff, which allow you to buy more upgrades. But eventually you'll be able to buy these really good upgrades that actually give you all these additional external assets each round. Each of the playbooks will also have a special ability and an additional mini game that they can get victory points from. So here, I won't go into it and disclose what the admin group will be doing, but they'll be working on trying to rezone the town and improve the prestige of the town by rezoning. You've got your primary goal. In this case, it's to improve the town's prosperity, and it's added to your victory point at the end of the sim. But there's also a secondary goal that's unique to your organisation, and a tertiary goal, and you get to pick one of these at the start of the game. And these are things that give you one special condition for getting victory points. So there's a note here saying, remember to notify the modifier each time you think you've achieved one of these goals, because I'm not going to necessarily be able to keep track of them all, but every time you think you've done one of these goals, 1, 2, or 3, send me a message and I will upgrade your playbook. Now under here are crises. You won't have any of these to start with, but every 3 weeks, most weeks we have a hotspot to address. But every 3 weeks is a special week, which is a crisis week, and that's a storyline that is specific to your organisation. So there's 4 different chains of story that run through the sim, and each of your organisations will get to resolve a dilemma that's particular to them, that's particular to your organisation. And these get recorded in your playbook as well. So if we can drop right down to the bottom, and I'm not going to go into these, leave this on screen too much because I don't want to give too much away, but your first crisis will tell you how it affects the town. So each crisis will affect one of the stats of the town. There's a little bit of story that's connected to it, and there's 3 choices that you get to have in terms of the choices you want to make. And down here is the secret information that you don't get to see when you make the choice, but as soon as you make the choice, this will be revealed. So it means you go on to your next dilemma is going to be 2C. Obviously, they've chosen the third option here. You'll get a bonus to the town stats. Oops. A bonus to the town stats, +1 to accord, and you'll get an additional worker. Each of the crises gets you an additional worker. So, and a little bit of story that tells you how that flows on from there. So those all get recorded. They'll come up as they go, but they'll also lead to major differences in what happens to the town at the end of the game. So there is something like 100 different outcomes depending on all the different choices that everyone makes, based that will have significant impacts on the stats of the town. All right. So confused? Hopefully not too much, but let me just say that it will become clearer as we play. If you want to get access back to any of these documents, there is a hub document that we've got linked in Moodle and on Teams that'll give you the link to the other documents. Now I just want to go back to those major phases of the game and to work through those to explain how all these things fit together. And afterwards, please ask me questions in class or in Teams. So first of all, town is defined by 4 stats: prosperity, accord, well-being, and safety. Each of those stats are modified by decisions you make throughout the game. There are 4 different organisations, the different player teams, and each of you is wanting to maximise one of those particular stats, but you don't necessarily want to see one of the other stats run too far down because that can have negative impacts on everyone overall. Each week we start with the news phase, where I madly put together the results of everything that you've done from week to week, which gets more complicated as we go, and tell you what the results are, and you get an idea of how the town's progressing. And then we have 2 phases in which you have choices. There's the organisation phase, where you go to the town hall Your first choice there before you make any purchases is to let me know what budget you want for that round, and from that I get back to once everyone's let me know their budget. So I need you guys to get back to me pretty quickly when the budget question comes up. You then get to pick where you're going to put those workers in the town hall, what benefits you're going to get from it, and then where you're going to spend those benefits on buying upgrades for your organisation. And again, the amount of budget you ask for determines the order in which you act. So you might miss out on a spot in the town hall that you want because someone else has taken it, or you might miss out on buying an upgrade because each of those upgrades is unique. Once it's bought, someone has it. On the other hand, you get more budget, and more budget can be more useful overall. So that's a decision you have to make in that round. So first of all, what your budget bid is. Second, where you're going to put your workers, what upgrades you're going to buy. We then move on to the problem-solving phase. Most of the weeks there'll be hotspots come up that you need to solve, but every 3 weeks there'll be those crisis points, which are the specific storylines that are specific to your organisation, that have big overall effects on the town. Where there's a hotspot, they'll be on the town page, not the town hall page, the main town page. The new hotspots for the week will be up. Any hotspots that didn't get solved last week will accelerate. That's not the word I'm looking for, but they'll get worse. And if they don't get solved in 3 weeks, there's a flashpoint where it's bad news and one of the town stats gets affected. All of that is secret information until you actually resolve it. So you really have to try and guess sometimes which of the hotspots you want to resolve. Do you want to put your resources into resolving the oldest ones because you don't want to have the backlash from them going to flashpoint, or do you want to pick the one that looks really good from the new ones that have been released? Now, when you're resolving those hotspots, you can collaborate with those external resources that are required. You can build them any way you want from any team. There will be a lead team who will do it with the backup of another team, and the lead team will be the one who puts the most resources into it. But this is where the negotiation part of the game comes in, and your ability, if you can't quite just solve a particular problem each week, you can talk to the other teams and say, hey, can I borrow a point of influence? Can I borrow, or can you give me a point of influence, and I'll trade it for something, or I'll trade it for future favors. Completely up to you guys how you do those trades, and whether or not you actually make good on that. Like if you agree for a current trade, you have to let me know and I'll make the trade automatically. But if you make an agreement for a future favor, it's entirely up to you whether you're going to honor that agreement or not. And that's where your maintaining good alliances with other groups comes into play. And sometimes it can be strategically expedient to break promises, and we need to think about what that means. All right, so in the problem-solving phase, you've got to gather enough of those assets to be able to solve that problem. You need to, again, this acts in order of the sequence set by your budget. Usually that's not necessarily a problem, but sometimes two teams might want to go for the same problem, in which case the team that has the order of priority will get it, and the other team will get another choice. So if you're trying to solve a problem someone's already saved, I'll let you know that, and you'll get another choice to pick another problem. And hopefully we won't get up to too many problems of everyone trying for the same problem, and too much tangles in terms of sorting out who gets to go first and who gets to solve which ones. Shouldn't be a problem, but if it is, I'll need to bang my head on the table a bit. And that's it. You the comms phase, you let me know which problems you want to solve, what assets you want to use for it, and then we go back into the following week. So it should become clearer, I hope, as we go. But that's a bit of an overview. Make sure you've had a look at all those screens. So have a look at the main screen, which is the town and the town's current stats and all the the current hotspots, have a look at your playbook. That'll tell you what your particular angle on the game is and what your particular powers are. Make sure you pick one of those tertiary victory conditions as well. And then also have a look at the town hall, because the town hall is where we deploy our workers, and we try and build up our organisations and make our organisations more powerful. So hopefully you'll have a good time with this. The previous group that ran through this had a great time with it. There were all kinds of dramas and interesting things that happened along the way. And at the end of the day, this will teach you a lot about strategic thinking, I think, and will actually help you understand that sometimes you've got to make hard decisions, and sometimes you have to really balance the risks, the missed opportunities, and so on, about the kinds of organisation decisions you make. And then therein lies the value of, alliances. Alliances can help you out when you're stretched thin. You can help other people out, but where is the limit of that? Where do you stop being friendly, and why? Okay, questions in teams, questions in the workshop, and let's get started.